Hello and welcome to another episode of Unique Professions. Now, when someone gets married, they usually normally don't think that their marriage is going to end in divorce. But, unfortunately, this happens. In fact, Australia has quite a high divorce rate in this country. Today, I have a divorce coach in here with me. Christine, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
What is a divorce coach?
Okay, so a divorce coach is sort of like a personal assistant, a concierge for working your way through separation, divorce, effective co-parenting. A divorce coach helps with the emotional aspects, the practical aspects. What they don't do is act as a psychologist, they don't act as a counsellor, and they don't act as a lawyer. It's like having a really good, patient, empathetic friend who can at times be brutally honest.
Yeah. And I guess with that, what are some of the big differences between a lawyer and a divorce coach?
Okay, so a lawyer is, specialist in the field of family law, obviously, and they are dealing and offering advice. So they are looking at the procedural aspects of the legal procedural aspects of getting divorced. They're offering their client individual tailored advice, which is specific to their circumstances and in their best interests, whereas a divorce coach is taking a more holistic approach.
Mm. And I guess I'm sure you get a lot of children who are affected by divorce.
Yes.
How do you navigate the children and maintaining their well-being?
That is a really important aspect, and I do not deal one-on-one with the children in my coaching practice. I'm dealing with parents, and the really important thing to remember is that the parents have the responsibilities and the children have the rights. So when people come to me, initially it's like, I haven't been able to see my children, what are my rights? And the very first answer to that is your rights. You have the responsibility and your children have the rights. So I'm continually keeping people future focused, making sure that their well-being of their children is at the forefront of every decision that they make.
Mm. And future focus, what is that? I can kind of get a bit of an insight, but can you give me more of an explanation?
Yeah, it's really important through the process of separation and divorce to remain future focused, but it's actually very, very difficult to do. Obviously, you've come through to a point of separation. That's taken a long time to erode the relationship to the point that you've decided that that's the way to go, and it's quite easy to focus on things that have happened in the past that have led you to this point, whereas the people I see who go through and come out most successfully and most efficiently and quickly to a recovery stage are the people who are able to remain future focused, and they're looking to play the end game.
What does a successful recovery entail?
It's different things for different people, I guess.
Yep.
But I think being able to function effectively, co-parent effectively, or alternatively to make the call that trying to co-parent is not going to be effective or in the best interests of your children, and taking steps to do what you need to do for the best interests of your children. My focus is always to try to bring parents to a point where they can and do co-parent effectively. Some people don't have children in the equation, so for them, recovery is a point where they're no longer defined by the grief and the disappointment of the separation, and they're moving forward with their own life in a positive frame.
When someone comes to you initially, what are some of the more common aspects or more common things that they might be feeling?
Grief over is the sort of overarching emotion that most people are feeling, and I like to think of that as sort of an umbrella, where all the pieces of the little triangle shapes of the umbrella, they represent different feelings. People will say, "Oh, I'm angry."
Yep.
Are you really angry, or are you frustrated? Are you disappointed? Are you resenting things that have happened in the relationship? And grief and the loss of the relationship that's the overarching sort of emotion, but it's split into lots of different types of emotions. So when people come to me, we get to the nitty-gritty of, okay, what is that actually? And what are you going to do about it?
Do you find that during your sessions you actually unpack a lot of mental health issues or issues that, there's some underlying reasoning for that divorce?
I have to be careful that I don't answer that question with a yes,
Yep.
because I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah.
So I can't determine whether someone has a personality disorder or a mental health issue. What I can say though is that although people come, no two divorces are the same. The pattern of getting out of the situation that you're in and moving forward, there is a pattern in that, and there are some very similar traits in how we deal with that divorce. So I do have good tools to help people to get through that process, but I would definitely not be diagnosing.
I've had a look at your website before, and you have a divorce resource split kit.
Yes, I do. That I have sort of stepped back from, to be honest,
Okay.
because whilst it was a very comprehensive product and an excellent product, even if I do say so myself,
Yep.
what I found was that people needed the hand-holding. And there's a lot of overwhelm in the separation process. There's a lot of fear about what does my future look like, a lot of disappointment in that whole picture of what you thought your life would look like. It's gone.
It's gone.
And I found that people, because of that overwhelm, because of a lack of confidence in their own ability, they weren't using the split kit effectively. They just couldn't really. The majority of people just couldn't deal with it.
Yep.
So that is actually where the coaching aspect comes in. So I can take the split kit in bite-sized pieces and say, okay, today we're going to deal with this practical side of the financial separation, and just do it little bits at a time, rather than here's your split kit, off you go, you're good to go.
All right, I'm just going to take a step back. We're going to take a... How did you actually get into the role?
I got divorced. So I got divorced a long time ago, and I was actually living in the UK at the time. My now ex-husband is a New Zealander. We had been living in South Africa. It was a bit of a dog's breakfast. And I thought I needed a lawyer. Everybody said, oh, you better lawyer up, you better a lawyer. He obviously had the same advice, and that's the process that we went through. It was stressful for myself, for my ex-husband, and definitely for my children. And really, at the end of the day, it cost a lot of money for not a brilliant outcome. And I had a fabulous family lawyer who was ex-South African living in London, and she just said, listen, you can do a lot of this yourself to save on legal fees. So I ended up doing a lot of the admin and the hack work myself. And I realised that actually I'm not special. A lot of people could be doing a lot of the admin themselves and then paying their lawyer for their expertise.
And what kinds of skills or processes did you bring from that learning into what you're doing now?
A bit of reality testing, and also, just taking accountability for your role. There's always three sides to a story, and it's quite. I do find it. A lot of people want to blame the other person, and I think I was probably, in that basket of people as well, to a certain extent. And I think just taking that accountability, learning to take accountability, learning to be future focused, learning to communicate effectively, learning to either lower, lose, or at least adapt your expectations of other people, and to a certain extent of yourself. You can take it a bit easy on yourself.
Yeah. And you said there's a blame game. I'm going to guess that's pretty huge. And it's always, it seems to me it's like one side against the other. Oh, they did this. Oh, they did this. How do you navigate that?
Okay, so that is where that's a fundamental difference between a divorce coach and having a divorce coach and having a lawyer. And the two can often run side by side. I have clients who are represented, and they come to me for other aspects of the process. But I sometimes see letters that have been sent from one legal practitioner to the other party, and they sometimes can be quite emotive. So part of my role with people is to say, okay, let's get rid of all the emotion in that letter and just look at the questions you've been asked, what you've been asked to provide, the answers that the people are asking of you, and be accountable. There's nothing to hide here. Just tell the truth, disclose all the facts, and just leave it at that. So being accountable is something that I hold people to, as I had to hold myself to.
Mm. And being accountable, I guess, is that for clients that you have, is that a really hard process for them to get into?
Sometimes, some people get there more quickly than others. In a divorce coaching environment, it's confidential. It's non-judgmental.
Yep.
I've seen a lot. You'd go a long way to shock me.
Yep.
You try really hard to shock me. So it's non-judgmental. I'm neutral. I'm just a person that you're fleshing stuff out with. And I think people can come to a point of accountability when there's not going to be any reprisals. They can tell me the truth. We'll talk about it. We'll say, okay, well, what else could you have done? Could you have done something differently? Did you react appropriately? How would you do it next time? And they can sort of see a bigger picture when they take themselves personally out of it, and the other person isn't firing back accusations or blame back at them.
Now, I'm just wondering, are your clients mainly mostly female or male?
But both.
Or both?
Both, yeah. I deal with both, and in about equal measure. I also I have part of my practice is in mediation.
Yep.
So often one party will be the first point of contact. We'll do a little bit of coaching together, and when there's a chance that it will be mediation, that coaching is really limited to one initial intake session. It gives then that person will instruct me to invite the other person, and I don't go further with coaching at that point, because then I would perhaps risk building a rapport with one person over the other. Then I lose that neutral position. So, yeah, generally, I can't really say it's one.
It's either or, yeah.
Yeah, husbands or wives.
Yep. Now, when you do an initial consult, when the first person comes in, what does that actually look like?
Okay, it's creating an overall snapshot of the circumstances of their relationship, financial and non-financial, particularly where there are children involved, strategies for limiting conflict and working towards the best interests of the children, and it's creating an overall snapshot of the whole relationship from when the people met, throughout the relationship, and since separation.
Now, have you found that maybe through, I know you're not a counsellor, you said that, but perhaps through that process, perhaps there might be some sort of way of getting that couple back together? Maybe there was some sort of underlying issue that that they haven't thought of, and with communication, they've kind of gone, oh, hang on, maybe that's something we can work with. Has that happened?
Yes, on one occasion. I guess because of the name, the name of my business is Divorce Resource.
Yes.
So by the time people get to me, they've made that decision. But it has happened on one occasion where people sort of took a step back, and I believe that they rehabilitated their relationship. But yeah, I think most people, by the time they get to me, they're looking for practical answers and strategies to move forward independently.
Now, with divorce, and I'm going to say marriage as well, it's that being a divorce coach, you want clients to be happy, but in some ways it's also a business or a way that's actually full of grief, full of emotions. How do you deal with that?
That's an excellent question, and that is something that I have to practice. It's not always easy. I see some fairly tragic circumstances, and over time I have learnt some good coping mechanisms. I debrief with other professionals, and I have I've learnt to set better boundaries for myself at the point of intake. So I don't work with everybody. I will sometimes say, look, this is not a good fit. I have a good network for referrals. I recognise much more quickly than I used to the limits of my abilities, and so I will refer more quickly, or redirect the person to another resource that might be better suited to them.
I guess there, you were saying just then that you do referrals. What kind of clients would you say are not the best fit for you? Can you give me an example? Or a situation?
Very high conflict, where people are not able to accept that play any role. People who are fundamentally dishonest.
Yep.
If you're not prepared to make full disclosure, it's part of the whole family law process, full and frank disclosure. If you want to cover up figures, if you want to manipulate the figures to make things look differently, I am not for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I do draw very firm boundaries around those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the, divorces, many people get divorced for many different reasons. But what are some of the most common that you find in your clients?
Mostly, as I said, to get to me, there's no two cases that are the same.
Exactly.
But there are some real patterns, and a lot of it comes back to a lack of communication. So I think people, they have pressures on them, and in the modern world at the moment, we've got financial pressures, we've got raising a young family is a pressure in itself. Add into that FIFO work. That's a significant amount of pressure to people. Increasingly, mental health is an issue of the either the husband or the wife or the partners and the children. So having a person in your home who's struggling with mental health issues can be very, very taxing. I think people just often grow apart, or their expectations or their goals change, and they don't change at the same rate. Sometimes people go in different directions, but it generally comes down to poor communication.
When you first started as a divorce coach, what strategies did you implement now and that you're still using today, or how have you also changed your, role?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, and underlying everything I do, whether be it in mediation or coaching, is active listening. And I've gotten better at that over the years. And active listening is basically really giving the person your full attention and your empathy, seeing what they're saying from their perspective, repeating back to a person, I heard you say this, am I right in thinking that you meant this? So that we're on the same page before I answer the question. And that's something that I'm directing my clients to as well, to become very good at active listening. To be respectful and to be courteous, no name calling, just business-like. Mm-hmm. Stick on the agenda that's established, and raise the level of communication to something that's going to be effective.
And how have you changed your process a bit, like something that hasn't worked at the start, or something that you've developed over time?
Yes, if I will be honest about it. At the beginning, I think I tried to tell people what to do, and I've learnt that is not, it's not appropriate, but it's also not effective. So the process of coaching and mediation to that point, it needs to be client-driven. Better outcomes are achieved when the individuals are not being told what to do, but they're self-determined solutions. So I've gotten a lot better, done a lot of training, been instructed by some very good mentors. Stop it, you're offering advice.
Yeah. What are some of your most positive things in your role, and some of the most challenging parts of being a divorce coach?
The most challenging parts are seeing people at their worst. It's a very stressful experience to go through, and that is very challenging, seeing people who are really hurting. And I get better at setting my own boundaries around that. The great points, like the fist pump moments, are seeing people grow, seeing people able to rebuild their connections with their children, rebuild connections with their ex-partners so that they can, greet each other. I absolutely love it when I have a mediation and get through 4 hours of, quite stressful negotiations, and then there's some laughter, maybe a hug. At the moment, I do all of my work via Zoom meeting. It's a benefit of having been through the COVID scenario. But often people after a mediation will sit around for a little moment in the mediation room, in the Zoom room, and offer each other compliments or talk about when they're next going to see each other, resort to a little bit of small talk. And for me, that's a massive win.
And with that, getting the children back, or at least getting, some sort of, remuneration with trying to get them, back into their lives. How do you get involved in that process?
Mostly my role is with the parent to help them to sort of improve their communication with the other parent, improve their communication with the child. If I have clients who are in the court process, part of what I do is role play with them so that we can just help, because really good communication takes practice, and you don't often get that co-parenting practice with anyone other than the other co-parent, and that can sometimes go a bit south. So I do a lot of role playing with parents so that they can practice what they want to say to the other parent, how they want to phrase it. We can say, well, when you said, I can say to them, when you said that, if I was that other parent, it would have made me feel like this. My reaction probably would have been defensive and the communication would have deteriorated. So can you maybe think of another way that you might be able to say the same thing?
Do you actually work with the children as well?
No, I don't.
No.
I'm just not qualified to do that. I must also say that very often I'm referring my clients off to psychologists and other organisations who offer parenting courses. I have a lot of tools and I have a lot of contacts. So it's quite, often I recognise, look, this is way out of my league. I'm not qualified to offer you any assistance here. However, here is a referral sheet. These organisations can assist.
And with divorce coaching, how did that, for me, before I started, researching this, obviously I knew what a divorce lawyer was, but divorce coaching was something a little bit different. How did that actually come to light?
It came to me through people asking me for assistance that didn't fit into my other job as a mediator. And also recognising as a mediator that the best outcomes were when people had a little bit of coaching so that they had all the information that they required to make decisions. They understood the information and that they had sort of developed their emotional state to the point where they could negotiate effectively. So I sort of felt that there was a bit of a gap between someone who comes and says, having issues, we need to resolve these issues, can we do some mediation, to, okay, intake, here, what are all the figures, how many children, when did you meet, blah, 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 or just all the basics, then straight into mediation, finding actually there's a bit of a lack of understanding. We don't have all the information necessary to make the decisions. So people would feel as though the mediation failed. And I felt it's actually not the mediation that's failing. It's not the mediation process that fails you. It's actually the preparation beforehand. So I started doing the coaching as a way of getting better results in mediation. Then I realised that I had to be very careful about that because I can't be coaching one party and not the other. So now I have very clear lines between when I'm a coach and when I'm a mediator. And if I'm a coach, I'm not a mediator because there's a conflict of interest for that party. I will refer to somebody else.
And you find that difficult to navigate sometimes?
Not anymore. I did initially because I wasn't quite aware of where that line was.
Once you know it.
Now I know where the line is, and as I said earlier, one initial contact and no more. Can't go into coaching if there's any expectation that I might invite the other party to mediation.
Do you think some people who come to see you, do you think maybe they see an advantage of coming to see you over perhaps going straight into the divorce law process?
I think a lot of people see coming to a mediator or a divorce coach as a very good part of their process. Whether it's an advantage or not is they can probably only tell me at the end of the process. One of the difficulties about family law is that it's not black and white. So you can have a lot of people spending a lot of money, spending a lot of time arguing about things that are actually not relevant. And so that's another part of my coaching role, is to help people who are in a heightened emotional state, reeling from perhaps some trust issues, infidelities, bad business decisions, financial ruin, etc., anything that's gone on, to actually say, all right, I appreciate that that's happened. I understand how difficult it is to accept. In the court, the court, we have what's called a no-fault jurisdiction in Australia. The court is not very interested generally in the activities or the episodes that went on to lead you to a point of separation. So part of a coaching hat is to help people to absorb their pain about that, but to realise that you can argue as much as you like about this, you can spend as much of your lawyer's time talking about it, you will not get a return on your investment for that.
Yeah. And with the divorce coaching, I know we've kind of said that, at the very first stage, the client will be experiencing grief, and you really want them to at least get into a spot or a space where they can, be happy or at least move forward.
Be resilient.
And resilient. Yeah, that's probably the main key word. And I know every person is different, and you can't have a toolbox for every single person. But how long normally does that process take? And how does that work for you? And is there any regression as well?
Yes, there is. It can take a long time for some people. Other people just move through very quickly, and it's definitely not a straight line. So I've written a book called The First Steps Through Separation and Divorce, and there's a grief wheel in there, and you move through the stages of grief and anger and shock and so this oh my gosh. And the other thing, David, that's really interesting and very, very common, in fact I'd say it's almost in every situation that I encounter, the parties aren't on the same page to start with. Very often one person has been thinking about the separation, planning for the separation, emotionally processing it for a long time before they drop it on
the other person,
the other party.
Yep.
So, one of the things I do in my role as a divorce coach is to help that person who's already done that processing to wait and be patient and appreciate that the other person has to catch up. It's not a straight line. So, I think most people would recognise they have something happen to them, there's shock, and then they get really angry about it. Then they get to a point of bargaining. And in a relationship situation, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to be married, but maybe we could just live in the same house together for the sake of the kids. And maybe we could just keep the finances together for the sake of the kids. But we're not married. And that might work for some time. In fact, it might be in your best interest to do that for some time. But inevitably, one person or other is going to say, look, this is not where we want to be. And then you might go back to angry again. Because, well, you said this and I said that. And blah, blah, blah.
Right, yeah.
So it's not a straight line. What we're trying to achieve is getting to a point where the regression back into the anger or back into the bargaining or wherever it is that you're going is for a short time. So I had a great expression about grief in particular that was given to me by a friend. You're in the ocean of grief. The waves are crashing all over you initially. You want to get to a point where you can recognise when the sets are coming in and either get to the water or start swimming.
I like that.
Or get out of the water or start swimming.
Yeah, that's good.
That's where you're headed with divorce as well.
And with that person who you just said there that has basically had a bombshell dropped on them, and thinking, oh my goodness, I had no idea. How does that kind of play?
Okay, so basically you show some empathy for that person. You appreciate that you've already been through that processing of what's going to happen, what's my life going to look like, how am I going to be able to support myself, and put some interim measures in place to alleviate as much of the, that person will have a lot of fear about what their future looks like, how they're going to support themselves, am I going to see my children, those types of things. So put some interim agreements in place to alleviate as much of that fear as you can for the person so that they can then spend their time and energy on processing the actual emotional aspects of it.
It's also something like you're putting building blocks, aren't you?
Yeah, yes, we are putting building blocks. Setting goals is one of the things that we do in coaching. Realistic bite-sized goals that people can achieve. And, when I hear myself say that, I think, everybody knows that. We've heard it so many times. But we often don't do it ourselves. The very disciplined people do. I know I haven't done it when I should have. So having a coach that you are accountable to, and you come and you have a weekly session, a monthly session, whatever that has been determined, you're more likely, most of my clients are more likely to stick with what they determined as their own goals. They'll have certain aspects of communication or certain aspects of self-growth, self-care that they're working on that week, that month. And when they come back to see me, that they're more likely to have done that rather than if they were trying to muddle through on their own.
Is there something in your coaching career or your coaching process that you'd like to evolve more or change even?
I'm sure the answer to that is yes. The answer to that is definitely yes. I'd like to explore how AI might actually help us in having. So I feel that it won't be very long before we have a little personal assistant in our pocket that we can ask questions, that we can talk to, who responds back to us. And I think there may be a role for AI as that personal assistant. They never tire of hearing you say the same things.
Yep.
It would never tire of you not meeting your goals. So I'm not, hopefully it would be effective. But I think there's something in that world that fascinates me.
Okay. And what fascinates you about it?
About it?
Yeah. It's interesting, yeah. For
Well,
sure.
I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of comfort. Well, there's a lot of comfort. There was a lot of comfort for me when I was going through this process in having an actual human whom I trusted
Yep.
that I could work with to get through this process. But it was expensive. It meant that I had to go to see her when I needed help. I couldn't always ask her the questions that I wanted. Sometimes I would ask questions that turned out to be irrelevant and cost me several £100s.
Yep.
So I think sort of shortening that sort of process to getting to the point where, okay, well, this isn't relevant, that is relevant.
Okay.
You need
Yep.
more information about here. Now go and speak to your person.
Yep.
That might help. There's a sense of urgency when you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There's either sort of, I want to put my head in the ground, but then it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Now I
And you
need
want
answers.
to answer these questions, yeah.
And those professional people aren't available at that time.
Yep. Now, having that, maybe help 24/7, whether it be a person like you in person or even a computer, at least then maybe, having or getting rid of all the irrelevant information, all of the irrelevant questions, then coming to you and saying, look, this is how I want to frame my divorce, this is kind of what my end game is. Perhaps that could even help you as well.
I think it would. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm sure it would. I really feel it would help family lawyers. Family lawyers spend a lot of time counselling or listening to
hearing all the
listening
arguments,
to stories,
Yep.
listening to arguments, and they are just listening to that person's script. If there was a filter for that,
Yes.
and so I don't know how it would work, but perhaps there's some role for AI in that.
And with the filter, I guess, I wonder, I know you're not a lawyer, but, I wonder how they navigate. I'm sure they get sick of hearing, the he said, she said kind of,
do. Yes, I know they
stuff.
do.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, is there something like that they can just say, we don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear this. This is what's important to us.
Some lawyers do.
Yep.
So I work quite closely with a few lawyers, and the feedback that I get from those lawyers about my clients is that they're very well prepared, and they stick to the agenda. They know what they're there for, and they make sure that the time that they spend with the lawyer at their X $100 an hour is well spent. So there's not a lot of storytelling from my clients. They've done their storytelling with me, or that they're journaling or other avenues for that storytelling process, which we all need to go through. So by the time they get to the lawyers, they're a much better qualified client.
Well then, this begs the question, if the lawyers don't want to hear all that kind of talk, then perhaps maybe there should be something, in there that perhaps you have to see a divorce coach as well. Maybe even if it's just a couple of sessions, just to get rid of all of that. I mean, that would obviously help the clients and obviously help the lawyers. Maybe that's something that, in the future.
Potentially. The family law process within the court system is changing, and more often people are going into ordered mediation. So that is actually part of the mandatory process now before getting to trial. There are there's other roles, there are other professions who offer that counselling. So psychologists, counsellors, other people who sit in that sort of
Space,
empathetic listening space, who I'm sure they also prepare clients well before they get into the legal situation. A lot of my clients don't engage lawyers. That's not to say they don't take legal advice, but they don't actually engage a lawyer to act on their behalf. So yeah, I think it will be better. I think the whole process for parents and for individuals and for children will be better the more collaboratively all of those sort of complementary practices work together.
Yeah, to make it a bit more smooth, as smooth as possible, I suppose. Now, a little while back you said that you do Zoom coaching and you pretty much that's how you do your clients. Now, of course, we had COVID here, still going on, so it hasn't ended. Did you find during the peak period of COVID that your clients, there was a higher rate of divorce?
I didn't find there was a higher rate of separation during COVID. After COVID, as I agree with you, we're not through completely. We're probably always going to have that overhang. But look, there do seem to be a lot more people coming to me. I'm busier now than I was. I've found that using Zoom is very efficient for myself and for my clients. They don't have to drive and park and be in a room together. So I think all of my clients are happy with that process. And I moved to live down in Denmark. So it's a limited pool down there for divorces.
Yes. And now, speaking of that, when you do your Zoom classes, Zoom coaching, do you find that for the clients it's less stressful for them? Or, because I'm thinking that going into a place, you've got partner one and partner two, there could be a bit of that, a bit of anxiety towards that. But when you're not actually physically in the room.
Yes, so I think it is less stressful for the parties. When I'm coaching, I'm only working with one party. When I'm doing mediation, then I have both the parties. I think it is less stressful. They're ready. They're in a calm environment, an environment that they're familiar with. We have in a mediation, there's an opportunity for a private session with the mediator, so the other person can take a break for 10 minutes or so. It's quite comfortable for them to be in their own environment, go make a coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever, rather than being in an office where they're just, sitting in a room waiting for their turn again. So, most people have reflected back to me that it works well for them.
What makes a good divorce coach? What makes a good divorce coach?
Being able to hold space for where that person is at that time is really important. Being non-judgmental about, we've all made mistakes. We all have behaved poorly and wish we'd done something differently. So just allowing that person to share their experience without judgment is very, very important. I think there is an element that I think is useful to my clients that I can be quite blunt. I like to call it practical. But if a person comes to my sessions week in, week out, tells me the same thing and does nothing differently, you're going to hear about that from me, and I'm going to suggest that you stop wasting your money.
I guess also it's important for them to work on themselves as well. You might be able to give them tools per se, but if I'm your client, I would have to go out and actually do the work myself.
Indeed, and that's when people have success. So the goals that they set, they're self-determined. I can't tell a person, listen, you need to do this. I've tried that and it didn't work. So it's basically about exploring where you're having trouble and how could you improve that? What sort of work do we need to do? And what tools do I have that I can offer? How can I refer you? What online courses? I've got a big bank of information. If you're going through separation for the first time, you don't have the same access to all of the resources that I can say, well, maybe this will help you, maybe that will help you.
And you find that when you work with clients, that perhaps you might have given, one set of advice or skills or, tried something, and that hasn't worked. And no matter how hard the client has tried, it's just not for them. And then so you kind of have to go back and go, okay, maybe give this a go. Does that kind of...
Yeah, there's feedback at the beginning of each session. There's feedback from how the determinations that we set at the end of the last session. Yep. How did that go? Sometimes it's, well, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I haven't given it enough of a try. Sometimes it's like, I really tried, it didn't work. And it's because of the nature of divorce, it's often, it's not just you.
Yeah.
It's that you're dealing with another party and children and a lawyer and other government bodies or whatever you're trying to deal with there. So yeah, we do try things from different angles.
Do you plan your sessions differently from the different stages of that person's in?
Yes, and they're all individually tailored.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there was a couple more questions. I want to know, when you are doing the divorce coaching, what are some goals that you set for yourself? Not for clients, but you.
Okay. I want to help that person to get through to a point where they can refer me to other people in the same thing, to say that the service that they achieved exceeded their expectation, and that the outcome that they achieved was inevitably in the best interests of themselves and their children.
Mm. Now, if someone here is listening to this afternoon, what would be your advice if they're going, thinking of divorcing their partner or have been recently divorced?
I would say if you're thinking about separating from a partner, to work towards a point where you are as sure as you can be that is the best avenue to take, because you're a long time divorced. So if there's any chance of rehabilitating that relationship, keep trying until you get to a point where you know that you've done all that you can. So I had a tool that I use for that, given to me again by a very good friend, and it goes something along the lines of, with all of the consequences of your decision, in the long run, will you be any happier? Recognising that there will be both positive and negative consequences of your decision. And if the answer is, with all of the consequences of the decision, will you be any happier in the long run? Well, no, because I'm going to have to deal with this, this, or this. Then you narrow the scope of that question until you can answer, yes, if I do this, in the long run, there's a chance I'll be happier. Then just do that. Mm-hmm. Keep doing that until you've got a new set of questions. So if there's any chance of rehabilitation, keep working at that. If there's no chance of rehabilitation, take some time to just calm yourself, to look after your health, to get good sleep, to make sure you revisit your eating patterns, and whether or not you're sort of leaning on other friends or leaning on drugs and alcohol for some sort of escape. Just really take stock of how you're caring for yourself, and then look at the practical issues of, okay, we are here, this is happening. What interim goals and what interim agreements do we need to put into place, and then what's the long-term strategy for moving towards final separation and final property split, co-parenting. I don't advise people to rush off to engage a lawyer straight away. I really firmly believe that there's a lot of work that you can do on yourself and for yourself before you find that you need to get into the litigation. That might be one of the things that you might want to do, is go and see a lawyer and say, well, these are the circumstances. But before you go there, find someone like me who can help you to get all the disclosure together, give you basic information about the legal process, the family law process, to give you basic information or general information about what the Family Law Act entails, so that when you go to see your lawyer, you've got a better chance of understanding their advice, and you can provide them with all the information that they need to give you that advice.
Now, if someone wanted to contact you or has heard you speak this afternoon, how do they get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is by email.
Yep.
Christine, Christine, at divorceresource.com.au. They can also contact me through my Facebook page, which is Divorce Resource, and they can contact me through the Messenger, or they can go online and get a lot of free resources before they come back to me by email. I'm reluctant to give my phone out over Spotify. But obviously an initial email or messaging contact will result in me giving them my phone number.
No worries. All right, Christine, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun, and I hope it's useful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.